You doing an intro?
Are we starting? Are we live?
We are live.
This is me looking off camera and we're actually live. Smooth. We are smooth. And we are here to steal your line. Fintech Insider Live is back. It's Thursday, it's 1 o'clock. And again, David Brewer is missing.
Why is he always missing? He's doing something in Norfolk yesterday with entrepreneurs. People want to talk to him.
He was talking to board members and banks and stuff this morning. David, if you're watching, call me.
We miss you, David.
We need to talk.
Yeah.
So, of course, I'm here with my colleague Simon Taylor. How are you?
I'm really well, sir. How are you?
Good. I'm very good. And of course, we've got Zoe.
Hi, guys.
So Zoe, what have the questions been like this week?
Right, let's have a look. So our first question from Yanis. Who should be in control of their digital identity? Do you believe that companies could pay customers for sharing their data with them?
Ooh. Do we? But so who should be in control of their identity? I think implied in the question is this emotive answer that you should be in control of your identity. But that's easier said than done, because the nature of identity, the assumption is an identity is a legal definition of when a company or country goes, you're you. That's Jason.
That would look great in 3D vision.
Yeah,
actually. Go on, sorry.
But you're you. So, and then they issue a document that you can authenticate against. It's really hard to get away from that. So there's this idea of self-sovereign identity that I am actually me and I continue to be me regardless of whether a government points at me or not. But the technology around that's still very early and nascent. But I do think this idea that if there are new business models around managing data and looking after your own data under GDPR could be achieved. But how you go about doing that, that's a longer answer for another day. Maybe for a podcast.
There you go. I actually think it's a trick question as well, because I think there's an assumption by using the singular word identity that we're looking back at that analog version, your passport, your driving license, like that's my identity. And to Simon's point, I have, I guess, lots of identities. By that I mean some way of proving I have the right or responsibility to do something or use something. So it reminds me a bit of actually tokens in the crypto space. Because I've got a season ticket that I use for my train ride in the morning. I've got a credit card that I use to pay. I've got my passport. I've got a variety of different, you might argue, identities which let me do certain things. And then other legal documents which show that I own my house or that I own my car or I have deeds. So I don't think it's as simple as saying, how do we replicate a passport or how do we replicate a driving license? Because that leads you down one route. I think in some way I have to be able to prove to other people that I have the appropriate rights and responsibilities to do something or use something. And that needs not necessarily one entity owning anything. It needs the infrastructure to enable that.
It needs a network of attestations about...
Well, I'm not sure I'm going to get into the network, but okay.
A network of attestations. So there's a number of interesting small companies that I don't think have cracked the user experience side of it, but how do I attest that a thing is true? Or how does one attest that one thing is true? And so there's companies like Evernym, there's companies like Tradle.io and many more that I'm not naming that are doing really interesting things in that space. And in terms of data marketplaces, have a look at Ocean Protocol. This stuff's super early, super interesting, but I think to Jason's point that he often makes is people haven't really thought through that user experience end. They haven't thought through that, why will I use it and why would everyone I know use it and what's that one thing going to be that helps it cross over? So great question.
I do think that there's something as well in PSD2 because ultimately the open banking protocols, the ability to prove or to allow a third party to access your data, your banking data, and to transact on your behalf, actually means that we kind of have an identity in there that could be used in a variety of different ways. So I think even outside of this nascent sort of network of trust, there are going to be some things coming along in the next year that I'd love to see some of these new identities built on.
A lot more to discuss for sure. Zoe.
Thanks, guys. And thank you, Yanis, for the question. Moving on, we've got a question from Runa. What do you guys think about Alexa for business?
Ooh, what do we think about Alexa for business? So I think there's two points I want to make on this. One, there is a little bit of let's put Alexa on everything in the innovation department theatre going on at the moment, and actually I find that quite frustrating. And again, it comes down to what problem are you solving for who? The idea of this sort of conversational banking, this idea of invisible banking, I think is really, really powerful. But I know, Jason, you have some thoughts in that area.
Yeah, I mean, a good friend of mine is head of product at Lab 126, which is where Amazon are developing all of these things. And I'm fascinated by this new interface, because that's what it is. It's whether it's the Google Home or the Apple HomePod or the Amazon Echo, it's a brand new interface paradigm, and it's so early. Like how we actually use voice in order to follow complex decision trees and paths, and actually make things happen and use that as an interface. It's very Star Trek. It's very computer, do something and have it happen. So I don't think it's just business. I think it's every type of service, the ability to stand in a room and to control both the room and the things that happen outside it. Obviously need all kinds of additional infrastructure being built. How do I authenticate? How do I verify it's me? How do a number of us in the same room use the same device? And so it's super early days in that voice control, voice protocol.
I think it comes back to your point you usually make about APIs around end-to-end journeys. Yeah. I think those end-to-end journeys haven't really been figured out yet. When I'm using Uber, I don't think about what APIs I'm using and how the app interface has enabled that and that the GPS has enabled that. And I think we are thinking still in terms of technology with conversational interfaces rather than what does that end-to-end journey look like. And those points you make about different voices, different noises, different contexts. What are those contexts, and what's that one thing that's going to make it cross over? I think that's always the killer app. With touch interfaces, it was probably games. There was this, I'm learning how to use this thing and it's kind of silly, but now I know how to use this interface. So great question. I wonder what it'll be. Zoe.
Third question is from Gary Fegan. Which company product do you think has gotten it right, and which do you think you should go in, shake them, and sort it out?
Oh wow, who's got it right?
I think this is a super difficult question. I think the companies that have got it right are those that you don't even think of as services and products anymore. Google search. I mean, it's just what everyone uses all the time, day in, day out. It's just one of those great products. And I might also throw Google Maps in there. Those utilities that actually you base your life on. Shall I throw an Apple product in just to balance this thing? They're the ones that I think have got right, where you just use them and it doesn't even register that you're using this thing anymore. It's just part of your life. Think companies that I'd like to go into and shake. I guess I'm a product person through and through. So actually, almost wherever I am and whatever business I'm working with or whose products I'm using, I can see ways in which I'd love to get in and shake that up all the time. From the letters they send, to the signs in the corridor, to the way that WeWork doors both slide and pull, and the same design of door does both. I would change most things that I see day in, day out. So I'm not sure there's one company. It's just that continuous development and that being able to continually take the problems that you see and fix them that I love.
Bound, banana, bound, bound, bound. I just wanted to say that was such a nice soundbite that I wanted to kind of end on it.
Nice.
This is what it's like being around Jason all the time. You just get these soundbites and you're like, well, there's nothing else to say.
But there is. But you're going to come up with something.
I'm going to say something that's not as impressive. But the companies I like, just to try and bring it into the finance world a little bit, my crushes are Stripe and Braintree. I think what they've done is much smaller, but again, you sort of don't know you're using them. They've disappeared into the background. They've solved for a market problem. Developers tend to really enjoy them. The business model works. It's really frictionless, really easy to use, and I think they've absolutely got it right. And on the other hand, name an incumbent. My frustration, I think, is more around the nature of the financial services industry. And it was actually David that originally made this point, that we have a lot of entrenched business models and suppliers and an ecosystem ecosystem that sits around the banks that maintain a status quo that can be hard to change, and it's often tech-led or tech-driven conversations rather than outcome-driven. Even though a lot of people in banks are completely aware that that's the issue and that we need to change direction. So I think it's some of those incumbent suppliers and business models that I'd shake, not necessarily in any one particular company.
Zoe.
So next question from Barb McLean. Barb, I hope you are wearing your 11FS hoodie as we speak. How many kilometres has the team travelled so far? And what are some of the best locations you've been to and why?
We should have added this up before we came here. I think there's been a fair old trouble, especially you, Jason, with the Midwest lately.
I went to, I think, 20 countries last year, working with banks, insurers, talking to all kinds of execs about what's going on both in open banking, the challenger banking space, this move from digitized to digital, the move from commodity products to intelligence services, and a move from those traditional channels to end-to-end journeys. And that takes a lot of conversations, a lot of working on new fintechs, new propositions. The most exciting, I loved Reykjavik. I thought that was a most amazing place. Just in terms of it not being like anywhere else I think I've been to in the world. You can often, wake up in a European capital somewhere and be a little disoriented as to where am I.
Which one?
Reykjavik is not like that at all. So met some great people. Iceland is a really sort of a particular demographic, a particular area, very small, very encapsulated. And I think that was probably one of my favourites from last year.
For me, it was South Korea. I think what an interesting country. I went there in the middle of the crypto boom, talking about cryptocurrencies. I saw the exchange in the middle of Seoul, South Korea, that's always on the photos. Every time you see the Wall Street Journal talking about South Korea, they show a picture of a shop, and I got a little selfie outside that shop. And just meeting and being in a place that was so alien at a different time zone, not really sleeping. I really enjoyed that experience because I was up strange hours and working here and then meeting great people that I'd never met before, and I think that was a heck of an experience. And so hopefully I get more opportunities to go to Southeast Asia, and it looks like we may be doing that.
Maybe.
Last question is from Kelvin M. How do you think the fintech industry in Britain will be affected by the likes of Alibaba and Tencent entering into the European fintech space?
Ooh, good question. I hope, there's two answers. The first answer is I hope the answer is that those companies provide services that consumers actually want and that they end up using. I don't know if I can see that. For some reason, it just feels like the Western tech giants have a bit of a monopoly that's hard to dislodge. They can't go into China, and the Chinese giants struggle to come into Europe. Maybe that'll change, maybe I'll be wrong. But what I suspect might happen is, more than anything, those companies will inspire maybe our tech giants, maybe our banks, maybe somebody else around the types of services that you can create in terms of having a chat-driven interface for commerce. I think that's really exciting. That's the one thing I think we should learn from them.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned before what I think is the three-step process for Chinese domination, which is that grow that billions of users network, and that's actually a scheme. It's the Visa and MasterCard version in China at the moment. Then come over to Europe and the rest of the world and convince them that actually we've got lots of Chinese visitors. It would be great if you could take that scheme so that we can use it. You start at the high-end shops, you work your way down, and suddenly then you can launch a product in that territory because you've got already the acceptance there. So there is, if we lived in just a MasterCard and Visa type of world, then that Chinese play, I think, is in full flow at the moment. But I think what actually opens up the market from having a large dominant player in one territory coming in, like muscling their way in, is open banking. Because with PSD2 and the ability to have someone give a third party the authority to make a transaction on their behalf, that brings all kinds of opportunities for disintermediating those traditional schemes. because now we're actually talking about using banking infrastructure, and that opens the pathway up a lot. So Mike Kelly, a friend of the show who is starting a startup called Curl, is really focusing on that. What do these new payment types mean in terms of creating new schemes? And I think that probably opens the market a bit more and makes it a lot more difficult for big dominant players, clash of the titans, to have such an effect.
If you see everything that's been done in payments on the internet for the past couple of decades, it's been a layer over the top of the cards rails.
Yeah.
Having a layer over the top of the kind of push payment rails in Europe is really, really compelling and interesting. Will those APIs ever be usable is my question, but we shall see.
Ooh, that feels like we're finishing on a dark point, like a negative. You've brought me down.
I'm a dark guy. Zoe.
Yeah, that's all we've got time for today. I hope you'll tune in next week at the same time. If you do have questions, it's www.fintechinsidernews.com. Please keep them coming, and thank you for your questions today. See you.
Thank you.
Bye. Oh, the Simon Taylor wave.
Yeah. The